Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lofty Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Tanisha Coffey, aka the Lofty Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining me. Now, as always, we are providing the best tips, tools, advice, and inspiration for aspiring and new entrepreneurs out there. So if you haven't done so already, click now to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Now, today's show is a special part of the book series. I messed that up. Let me start again.
It's all right.
Sorry.
All good.
It's inevitable. Okay. All right.
All right.
Hello and welcome to the Lofty Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Tanisha Coffey, aka the Lofty Entrepreneur. Thanks for joining me. As always, we are providing the best tools, tips, advice, and inspiration for aspiring entrepreneurs and new entrepreneurs out there. So if you haven't already done so, click now to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. Today's show is part of a special series I'm doing with some of my fellow co-authors of the book, The Fearless Entrepreneurs, Fear Less, Be More. Now, today I'm chatting with Mark Ledlow, host of the Fearless Mindset podcast and owner of Ledlow Security. Thanks for joining me, Mark. How are you doing today?
Great. My apologies for the technology lapse that we got here, and now I'm home. I'm here at the picnic, having a chat with you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we have to be real careful today because I don't want to give away everything that's, in your chapter. Your chapter is, let's just say, I had me a couple little tissues, you hit on some heartstrings, for me personally as well. We'll get into that a little bit.
Sure.
There were definitely some things that stood out to me. Before we jump into that, I want to know just a little bit, just give them a little bit more about you and kind of your background as an entrepreneur.
It's funny you mentioned entrepreneur because when I was in the Marine Corps, I never envisioned me now, ever. If you had told me I'd be owning a business and gone through three different partners and a couple divorces with business partners and be co-authored in a book and running a successful security business and have a podcast, I would have told you you're crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. And I think that was one of the things that was interesting to me with your story is that I did not enter entrepreneurship, just saying, that's all I want to be when I grow up. For me, it was more of a life turned me down this path. And, I just held on, for the ride. And so, I just think it's really interesting when you find those people, because I think most people think that everybody has everything planned out when they are entrepreneurs and when they step into it. And that's just really not the case. And in some cases, like in yours, it was kind of part of an eye-opening experience that kind of led you to that. So tell me a little bit about that. You kind of touch on it heavily when you kick off your chapter in the book.
The motivation, I think, for me in entrepreneurship was probably having friends that were entrepreneurs, and they just showed me a different world that I didn't know existed. Because my track was I was going to become a cop in Southern Oregon. I thought about being a SWAT guy, and I worked corrections, juvenile corrections of all things, which is the hardest corrections you could ever work because, the kids, they kind of beat out each other in prison or youth corrections. So I got a taste of that, but I knew that wasn't my end. I knew for some reason in my gut, I knew there was something much better beyond law enforcement for me, corrections. And I'd be working nights, graveyard shifts, I think, and I'd be online studying bodyguards, in Southern California. And then fast forward that, I jumped in, the corporate America after I got out of college, thinking I'd be a corporate guy, very successful in corporate America and sales, business development stuff. But the 2008 market crashed, and I had to reinvent myself, overcome and adapt. And that's something I learned from the Marine Corps. And I pivoted, and I was like, you know what? Let's leave Southern Oregon. Let's go try LA. Everybody told me, you have lost your mind.
Why? Why would they just, I mean, Oregon and LA quite different, I'm sure, but
Well, if you think about it, most people that live in Southern Oregon are retirees from LA. And so some of my good friends work from LA and they go, "You're going to move to where?" "Oh, no, son. No, you're not going to do that. No, no. Don't ruin your life." I'm like, but there's so much opportunity. And, I did my research and stuff, and the bodyguard thing just became appealing. And it was interesting. I just went interviewing down there, and then some friends of mine were in the Hollywood circuit. So I did a little bit of stuff in Hollywood. Being the military guy, I had some technical skill sets that the Hollywood liked by being in a Marine. So I, boom, jumped into that. Next thing you know, I'm being featured in all these TV shows in Dress Blues, and worked a little bit of SAG-AFTRA member. But while I was doing that, I was looking for something full time. No, did I want to become an actor? No. I knew the reality for me at my age was 100%. I would never be an A-list celebrity actor. I just knew it. It was not in my DNA to live in my car, be homeless, do auditions, and try to become the next Brad Pitt. I just knew in my heart that wasn't me. I just knew it, but it was something fun to do while I was in my journey for trying to find my way. And then, some opportunities to come up in the security world, and a lot of networking, a lot of stuff that I learned in corporate America. I started applying that when I was in LA, just starting networking the heck out of my name, and started working a lot of weird jobs, and working high net worth individuals. And next thing you know, I'm protecting dignitaries, royal family members, prince and princesses from the Middle East. And then I was like almost like the Secret Service version to the president, but to the private sector. And then all of a sudden I'm bodyguard. And then it just 2008, it just ripped.
So in 2008, is that when things took off? Because you said you had the kind of when the crash hit, the market crash, you got affected by that. Is that that's when you went to LA?
Or 2008 is when I went to LA. That's about when I went to LA, trying to get my feet wet, doing some interviews, and I had my first offer in that summer to work on a high profile Indian tribe down there. And I had that offer. Next thing you know, I was on one of the largest security teams in the country, next to the Secret Service.
But when you left Oregon, were you still in kind of the mindset, I'm leaving to do something new, but I'm going to work for somebody else? Or had you already kind of begin to say, maybe I need to try doing my own thing at that point, or did that come later?
That came later. That came through experiences, I think, working in the security world and getting exposed to the major players in the business and getting their trust, and then just basically getting promoted really quick.
Right.
And then I started seeing invoicing and hearing about what was being billed for security, workers and all that. I'm like, wow, how much is being billed? How much did I make? How much do they make?
Yes. Okay. So I think that's something critical, and that a lot of people don't think about, especially people who are working in positions in corporate who have a very, very specific skill, that the company is literally being built around. They don't necessarily think about the aspect of what is the company making, because obviously they have to be making more in order to sustain the company than the employees that they're paying. And so, for those of you listening out there, if you're thinking about making that jump to something else, start thinking about the skills that you have. What are you being paid to do now? A lot of people think, oh, I can't start a business because I can't do anything. I don't know anything. Yes, you do. Somebody is likely paying you for a skill set right now that somebody else would be, find valuable. You just would have to, do the marketing yourself, which is not easy. It's not easy being an entrepreneur by any means. So I think that's hugely important to kind of point out. All right. So in reading your story, I know you said a critical word in there, pivot. And just from kind of reading your chapter, I know that you had to pivot a few times, just through the progression. And you mentioned about the Marine Corps being a critical kind of force that helped you to be able to do that. So, I mean, my husband's, former military, but I am not. And so, I want to know, what was it that was instilled in you that allowed you to be able to pivot? Because that's something that a lot of people had to do during the pandemic. And as an entrepreneur, quite frankly, you will have to do it several times just because of that's part of entrepreneurship. So what was it that helped you to do that?
It was a couple things. It was the foundation the Marine Corps gave me in boot camp, and that foundation of nothing can stop you. When you go through boot camp, they're stripping you of everything you got. But when you earn that title, graduation date, you realize that pain and the agony of that boot camp and what that was like. But you realize it was 90% mental and 10% physical. Everything we go on in life is 90% mental, 10% physical. It's all in our heads. What the Marine Corps gave me was that, I guess, trigger pull in my mind, saying there's nothing you can't get through. Nothing. Even in career, you get fired. I've been in the security industry. I've been fired more than I can count. Hey, somebody didn't like me. Competition didn't like me. I took someone's position, and they had their partner going to get that position. It's a dog eat dog industry, and it's ruthless. But the Marine Corps gave me a tenacity and a backbone to which it helped me overcome adversity. It helped me persevere, and also mentorship by friends of mine that were multimillionaires. They think differently. They think it's the way they think. It's how they think.
Okay, so please dive into that, because I remember a phrase that you had in one of your chapters. You said W-2 mindset versus owner mindset. What do you mean by that?
Well, if you get around a business owner that's very successful, the biggest thing that's most important and valuable to them is their time. It's ownership of their time. It's control of their time. It's control of time and money. And people in the workforce that work for a W-2, they don't understand that. They're working for a living, and they work paycheck to paycheck like a gerbil. Every 2 weeks they get paid. Every 2 weeks they get paid. And because of that fact, a lot of people in the workforce don't comprehend, don't understand, and are often scared of that new world. Unless you've been mentored by somebody that's had that. That's why you look at many self-made, generational wealth. The wealthy teach their young their own form of economics. If you look at people who collect checks for a living, it's a generational. I hate to say it, but it's a generational curse, because generations teach their own on how to create their own wealth. If you get around a multimillionaire, chances are that multimillionaire's family is pretty financially independent. But most people who collect a W-2, they're financially broke because they don't understand the concept. It's not that they're stupid or mean; they just don't know what they don't know. And that's what happened to me. Is I got around, power of association. I get around multimillionaires that had control of time and money and created an asset. People in the job world that collected a paycheck or W-2, they have not been trained how to do that. They don't know. No one has taught them. And it goes back to your education. How are you educated? Are you educated financially, how to control money, or does money control you? So there's two different financial educations you get also being an entrepreneur. And I have several friends that are multimillionaires, is how they think. It's all about how you think.
So when you were kind of going through your journey, your transitions, 2008 hits, you're forced to find something different. But at that point in time, before that, you were in that kind of that W-2 mindset. Yes, you had friends, but it's one thing to have a friend who's doing something else and you see that it's possible. It's another thing to take that leap yourself personally. So what was it? I know that you were doing some working for other companies, but eventually you did make that jump yourself. So what was it in you that made you say, I'm going to switch this mindset. I'm not going to be afraid. If you were ever afraid, what made you make that shift?
Here's two thought processes that I went through. am I going to build my boss's dream or am I going to build my own dream?
Oh my goodness. Oh my husband, that's like one of his favorite kind of things to say. And he's got another less PC reference that he that he uses sometimes.
I can imagine.
But I mean, but yeah, that's exactly it. You know, when people are you know, working for another company, they are literally building out, helping someone else's dream to be lifted up. And while of course people do have their own dreams, even while they're working for someone else, sometimes I think people lose sight of that dream, or their dream is limited to what they can do with what they're given in their current position, versus thinking, like you said, with that different mindset, how can I take, because there's nothing wrong with, you know, doing a 9 to 5, but it's also thinking about how can you also do more, and what happens if that 9 to 5 isn't there to support you, that every 2 weeks that money stops coming. You know, so what would you say is something that someone who's on the cusp, you know, we're living in a time now where, you know, COVID-19 has happened. The world has been shaken up. Some people, you know, excelled, some people didn't, some people were fine, but then have had a shift in their priorities. You know, so what do you tell somebody who's kind of in that middle ground? You know, they've had an epiphany, you know, COVID was life-changing, and spoiler alert, Mark's story was life-changing. You know, the thing that he talks about in his particular chapter was absolutely life-changing for him. And so I, you know, kind of in that vein, in that perspective, how do you help someone to not be afraid to take that leap into entrepreneurship or into something else, whatever that something else is that they're wanting to do?
Well, you know, in my book, I say, hey, you only live once. You only get one shot at this thing called life. Mm-hmm. And is it going to take COVID-19? Is it going to take a family death? Is it going to take a life-changing event for you to decide that you want to control your own destiny? Or are you going to wait for somebody else to tell you how to live your life and control your destiny? And that's where I came to my life. Like I was told the most expensive thing you'll ever buy in your life is your time back. And they were right. I'm like, whoa, had I not spent the time to build out, and I learned what the power of duplication was, and that took some time, but it took belief. It took belief in myself that, you know, you are almost invincible, that you can accomplish great things, but you have to have a belief and buy-in, that people buy into you, and having that Marine Corps background and having the knowledge sewed into me by that power of association and people that were in, you know, very high statuses. Well, it's not high statuses, but they had control of some of their time because they made smart decisions in business or in life. And having them mentor me, you learn little secret sauces. You learn little secret recipes that help you make good decisions for yourself. Mm-hmm. As I was taught long ago, is show me your, you know, coach and mentor, I'll show you your future. Whatever advice they're giving you, look at their life now. Is that the life you really want?
Right.
Do they have a great marriage? Do they have a great relationship? Or they divorced a couple of times? And if they're giving you bad advice, look how they live their life. Because I guarantee you, if they're giving you advice now, and let's say you're 20 years old and they're 40, 50, and they're just pissed off at the world, I would not know if I'd want to follow that lifestyle or their advice, because is that fruit on their tree? Is that credibility? Is that the fruit on their tree that you want in your life? So I learned that a long time ago. That's probably the best creds of anybody, you know, looking at anybody at their lifestyle to figure out what I want. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you have a lot of these college education professors, highly qualified people, but hey, is that the life you want? Say you want to be a doctor. Maybe you want to be a doctor and save lives in the ER. Maybe be a surgeon, because that's your passion. You're gifted in that. You have the natural God-given strength to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But make your passion what you send you truly in your DNA. If you're trying to be a professional coach, and you're an introvert and made to be an engineer, maybe dial it back a little bit and find out your identity. Because I think people get lost in finding out their identity. And the journey with my dad was, you kind of lose yourself in that journey of him battling brain cancer. And had I not built out that asset that I had, I could not spend 6 days a week with him, 8 hours a day, if I had not built that business.
Yeah, for you, the asset was your business. You had that in play so that when life did happen, you were able to still manage. I mean, of course, you were a caregiver, full time, so that was extremely challenging. I can only imagine. But entrepreneurship allowed you to be able to do that. No 9 to 5 is going to just let you take off for 4 years to take care of someone else. And so I think that's, if nothing more, just a testament to people to really think about the life that you have, the life that you want, and think about the control, how much control you really have over those things right now. And if you don't have as much control as you would need in case the unthinkable happens, then you might want to, kind of shift some of the things that you're doing so that you have options, right?
Right. And what I found out too is the most powerful person on this planet is a debt-free man and woman.
Ooh.
Once you're cleared of debt, you have zero debt in your life, you owe no man or woman. Think about that for a minute. You have zero debt. You know how much power that is in your business? You owe nobody anything. And that's one thing that was the most powerful thing I ever learned from, these entrepreneurs that I knew. The most powerful person on the planet is a debt-free man and woman.
Right, because you don't feel restricted. You don't feel as required, if you will, to have to keep that job because you have to pay for this and because you have to do that. So there absolutely is, tremendous power in that. Oh my goodness, that's a nugget. So those of you, listen to Mark. That's powerful, because a lot of people, with everything that's happened in the world, they're either struggling to hold on to things, or they have lost things and they're mourning those losses. And they're things, but that was the key word, they're things. And there were things that were tying them. And sometimes those losses of those things can actually be freeing. It's like you were saying, part of that journey is, sometimes it's not easy. Everything will not be pleasant. Your experiences are not pleasant. You had jobs and lost jobs and competition and like all of that. And I'm sure most of that was not things that you would have chosen. However, it brought you to where you are. And in those scenarios, those losses can give you more freedom than what you would have ever had those things never happened. So I think that's really powerful. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast. So you have the Fearless Mindset podcast. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you talk about with that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the podcast, because originally a buddy of mine that's a producer of it, he said, hey, you'll land your best client ever. You'll have your guest on, it's your potential client, land and get a contract and get business. And that was the premise of the whole thing when I first began it. And then a year later, today, I think marks a year anniversary with the podcast. So I can celebrate that. Yeah. Thank you. And we were ranked numbered in the top 10% globally with listen notes. That was like 2 months ago. And the beauty of that thing was, I think I evolved. I changed. I grew. I got over myself. I got over my own fears. And the first 10 episodes were the worst, because I was struggling dealing with Mark Ledlow, getting over doing this, looking at the camera. Now I don't even look at the camera anymore. I just talk, And what the podcast basically was a gift for me, for my father, who was fearless in his life and everything that he did in his life. He was fearless. And, when that launched, COVID-19 hit, and I usually do conferences, and I go to security conferences and meet people to get business. And that was the original premise of the idea of the podcast. But what it turned out to be is doing a discovery conversations with each guest to find out how they overcame adversity, how they overcame, like, I love talking with Frank Mir, you know, 2-time world heavyweight champion with the UFC. And the guy has no fear. He just, nothing scares him. And he's a, you know, multi-millionaire, but he was afraid to take chances in the cage and face objection. And, you know, he's been through a lot of stuff. I mean, the guy's been through a lot, but he's a perfect example of a normal guy overcoming so much adversity and making the best out of crap, you know. And, you know, I had that Navy SEALs. I had Mike Trott, who's a mentor of mine in the security world. He was my first guest who helped launch it. And with the podcast, what I learned too, it's not about the host, it's about the guest. And the minute you figure that out, it's so empowering because nobody really cares about what Mark Ledlow's thinking. It's about, holy crap, you have that Navy SEAL guy, Brent Gleason, or Juan Gonzalez, instructor on the Navy SEAL teams, because the audience wants to hear these powerful stories of these guys and gals overcoming adversity and being fearless in their life and what that looks like. That's an impact. That's powerful. And those are stories that, you know, will impact many, you know, ears and eyeballs if they're watching and listening to the podcast. But it was, for me, it was actually a learning process of how not to be scared, how not to be afraid of your own shadow when you get on the camera and look at the camera and it's recording at you with a little white light. And it's being able to psychologically block it out and just share your story.
Right.
The medium is the most powerful thing. And now I have the podcast, and I want to use it to impact millions of people's lives, especially our vets. Our veterans are the most probably precious commodity our country has. And yet they have the highest divorce rate highest suicide rate with PTSD and those type of mental health issues. And I'm like, you know what? Why not use my platform to impact millions of people's lives around the world? And if that takes a book, co-authoring a book and bringing on some great guests on, but it's not about me. It's about the guest and serving that guest and their message to the world. And that's what I figured out. You know, I think I'm episode 50 now. And Gina L. Osborne. Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun. I mean, Gina L. Osborne, we just released her podcast yesterday, and she's a retired FBI agent, former espionage spy for the Army in Germany, and she has an amazing story. And I'm highlighting a lot more ladies in business this fall, so that's gonna be exciting. I got a lot of people from Clubhouse coming on, so everybody's jumping on the wait list to get on. But it's been very enriching, very powerful.
Very good. Very good. So how can people connect with you if they are wanting to check out the podcast? Where can they listen?
We're on iHeartRadio. The easiest way is type in Mark Ledlow on your search. And I just trademarked the Fearless Mindset, got the letter from the government like 2 weeks ago. So we're officially trademarked.
Yes.
And so we'll be selling some books with Linda West here soon, Linda Sunshine West. So we'll be pushing the books out probably on that website eventually. And I'm on, you can find me on Instagram at the Fearless Mindset Podcast. I'm on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Ledlow. And then, the website is called www.fearlessmindsetpodcast.com. But it's easier enough just to Google my name. In Apple, we're in Apple, iHeartRadio, and Amazon. We're all over the place. So I think we're up to 50 episodes. So thanks for asking. Of course.
Well, I know that you have, had a long day and then topped off with the tech issues that I put you through. I apologize.
It's all right. It's all good. It all worked out.
Definitely. I so appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. For those of you listening and watching, you can read Mark's full story and mine too in the book, The Fearless Entrepreneurs, Fear Less, Be More. You can find more by looking in the show notes, or you can visit thelofttyentrepreneur.com/The Fearless Entrepreneurs to grab your copy and learn more. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate you. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.